To take a call on this important bill. I feel somewhat, after my last two colleagues have been arrested and put under surveillance by the SAS, I feel somewhat kind of left out. I mean, I don't think I had such a colourful past that It's true. I don't think, maybe I just need to get my file. I mean, I know Keith Lott got his file, and it was about a foot thick, Keith. As I remember you saying from once before. That's right. But seriously, Mr. Chair, I mean, this is an important piece of legislation. There was, as I understand it, 23 different written submissions to cover mainly this first part of the bill that we're looking at the moment. And as has been said by others before me, the fact that these had to be heard in secret, I think, was regrettable. And while there is some interest in this bill, I do think that we could have looked at some of the submissions independently in secret. But I think for the most part, most of the submitters did not feel that their submissions needed to be heard in secret, nor did they actually want them to be heard in secret. They actually wanted their submissions to be heard in the public arena. So I think with that prelude, I just wanted to move into some of the issues. And I want to start actually this submission by actually quoting Sir Geoffrey Palmer, who the Minister quoted earlier in his, I think it was first or second reading, which I think perhaps summarises the essence of and the purpose of this part one. He said he was also, of course, a minister of the SAS, and he said, to a very significant extent, national security means just this: freedom from interference, freedom from terrorist attack, freedom from deliberately incited racial violence, freedom from espionage, which itself threatens basic freedoms such as privacy, freedom from the kind of genuinely subversive activity that is aimed, not just in theory but in fact, at destabilising or overthrowing the very democratic system upon which the exercise of civil liberty depends. And I thought that was a particularly relevant quote, and that needs to be looked at in balance with that of the right of privacy, the protection, and those powers that might impinge on a person's privacy, and certainly those powers that might impinge on on basic human rights that govern our country. Now, what I wanted to talk about, and Trevor Mallard mentioned it at the very end of his contribution, which is basically bringing this. This is really about bringing this bill up to date, so that it has the same sort of ability to look at powers of surveillance in the 21st century. And it's been 42 years since this was properly updated. And the government, although I'm not exactly sure whether this is particularly relevant, would like to get this through before the Rugby World Cup. I don't quite understand the urgency, given the fact that we have, I think, a security intelligence service that is well and truly in place and working well. Whether this is going to make all that much difference, nevertheless, it is. I mean, perhaps the Minister might want to comment on that, on what difference it would make if this piece of legislation didn't come up for the Rugby World Cup. The submissions to this part, Mr. Chair, focused on 4 general areas: the surveillance powers of the SAS, and that's including the electronic surveillance and tracking capabilities, which I just mentioned; the protection of employees and others assisting the exercise of warrants from liability, and clearly that's necessary, as the SAS does rely on a number of other people and individuals in the exercise of their work. the delegation of powers, including powers to exercise warrants, Mr. Chair,
David Chair.
exercise warrants, and the absence of a requirement to name all of the people assisting. And again, I think that's pretty self-evident why that is the case. Obviously, people assisting the SAS could be compromised in the actions that they assist with. And lastly, the oversight and accountability, including issues of human rights and the role of the Inspector General of Security and Intelligence. I was pleased, Mr. Chair, that in the bill that a number of amendments were made in the committee in somewhat in response to those 4 areas that submitters brought up. First of all, on the principles, and David Parker spoke to this. This is the section 4 AAA, which is being brought into the bill to, in a sense, highlight the work of the Security Intelligence Service, and actually runs through those in terms of what the Security Intelligence Service is trying to do in terms of its performance of its functions, and it lists them there in the 3 subparts. Contributes to keeping New Zealand society secure, independent, free and democratic, contributes to the participation of New Zealand in the maintenance of international security and part of our obligations, and then looks at the acts in accordance with New Zealand law and all human rights standards, and this is one of the things that the Human Rights Commission insisted went in as part of their contribution to the committee, except to the extent that they are in relation to national security modified by an enactment, in the discharge of its operational functions independently and impartially, and with the integrity and professionalism in a manner that facilitates effective democratic oversight. So those, while you would hope that that was inherent within the legislation, with the actions of the SAS generally, I think having those explicitly stated, Mr. Chair, I think do add to the bill and give, I believe, some more confidence, perhaps, that to those people who have some nervousness about it, about this bill, in the way it's going to be carried out in the future. The other aspect that I want to touch on is the destruction of irrelevant records, and this is part 8A, Mr. Chair, that has also been brought into the legislation. Once again, I mean, the idea is that those records, that information is collected that is not particularly relevant to a case, would be destroyed once it was, I guess, seen as being not relevant. And it says here in 2A of Part 8A, as soon as practicable after the expiry of an intelligence warrant that authorises electronic tracking, the Director must ensure that any records resulting from the electronic tracking undertaken under that warrant are destroyed, except to the extent that those records are relevant. In other words, that a lot of information is likely to be gathered in an inquiry. All of that is not particularly relevant and should be destroyed. Now, I guess the question I have again for the Minister is, how do we safeguard that information has been destroyed? How do we know it has been destroyed, and what sort of safeguards could we ask for as a Parliament to make sure that that is happening? Now, it might be there in the legislation. It might already be well covered, but I would welcome the minister's intervention on that part. Just a last point, Mr. Chair, and that is the point on mistaken identity. Another part where the bill was modified. This is in section 4B on page 6 of the legislation. Once again, let's refer to this piece here. It's amended by adding a number of subsections that the Minister or as the case requires, the Minister and the Commissioner must consider whether to include conditions in an intelligent warrant to minimise any risk that the warrant...
Chris Hockenvold.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I move that the question be now put.
I'll hear David Parker.
Thank you, Mr